This video is how to determine if a line is a bisector or drawing a perpendicular bisector. So let's go ahead and get started. To determine if something is a bisector, the word bisect means cut in half. So if it's a bisector, it has to go through the midpoint. If it's not a bisector, it's not going to go through the middle. So if we have to determine if something has been bisected, we have to know where the middle is. This problem is as easy as us calculating the midpoint and plotting it. So determine if WY bisects AR. So what we're going to have to do is calculate the midpoint. We're going to have to use point A and point R. If we're going to calculate the midpoint, we need to use point A and point R because we need to know if line or segment WY actually goes through the middle. Now for the most part, most of us can kind of look at that and see where the middle is, but if you can't, that's perfectly fine. You just use your midpoint formula. So let's calculate the location of A. The location of A, we start at the origin, negative 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we go down 1, 2, 3. Let's calculate the location of R. We're going to go to the right 1 and up 1, 2, 3. So 1, 3. So I have A being negative 5, negative 3, and R being 1, 3. We're going to go ahead and use our midpoint formula. The midpoint formula is us adding the x's together, x sub 1 plus x sub 2 over 2, comma, y sub 1 plus y sub 2 over 2. Make sure that you're labeling your x's and y's, so I get x sub 1, y sub 1, x sub 2, y sub 2. Basically what we're going to do here is just add our x values together. So n equals, I'm going to take my x1, x2 value and just add them together. Negative 5 plus 1 over 2. We're going to do the same thing with those y values. Negative 3 and 3. So negative 3 plus 3 over 2. Next, we're going to go ahead and type this straight into our calculator. If you're trying to solve for the midpoint, you have to make sure you do one thing. You have to make sure that you put the numerator in parentheses. So parenthesis, negative 5 plus 1, close parenthesis, divided by 2. We get a value of negative 2. Let's go ahead and do that same thing for the y location. So parenthesis, negative 3 plus 3, close parenthesis, divided by 2. And we get 0. What you're going to do from here is just plot the midpoint. So we calculated the midpoint, so we're going to just plot it. So negative 2, 0 is located here. The middle of AR is here. WY crosses here. It does not go through the midpoint, so if we're determining if it's a bisector, the answer is no. WY doesn't bisect segment AR. That's all. If it doesn't go through the middle, it's not a bisector. The last type of problem is to draw a perpendicular bisector. Perpendicular means 90 degrees. Bisector, remember we just said that it goes through the midpoint. So we actually, in this problem, and I just abbreviated the word midpoint because we already wrote it. This problem actually requires us to do two things. It requires us to find the slope and find the midpoint. So let's calculate midpoint first. So the location of A is negative 1, 2, 3, 4, and up 1, 2, 3, 4. Negative 4, 4. B is 0, negative 2. So the first thing we have to do is find the midpoint. I'm not going to write the formula again. We've already written the formula. So let's just kind of refer back to it. So midpoint, add the x's together. I have a negative 4 and a 0. I'm going to go ahead and add those together. Negative 4 plus 0 over 2. Then I'm going to do the same thing for my y's. I'm going to add my 4 and my negative 2 together. 4 plus negative 2, or just 4 minus 2 over 2. Okay? So let's go ahead and simplify. I'm going to go ahead and type this into my calculator. Be mindful when you type it in that the numerator has to be in parentheses. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do -4 in parentheses. So parenthesis, -4 plus 0. Nope. Parenthesis, -4 plus 0, close it, and then divide by 2, giving us an answer of -2. We're going to do the same thing with the y's. Parenthesis, 4 minus 2, close parenthesis, divided by 2. Now you could leave this as 4 plus -2 divided by 2. They both simplify to the same thing, so it's really your choice if you want to always keep it plus or if you want to change it to a minus. So our midpoint is -2, 1. We want to go ahead and we want to plot the middle. So -2, 1, 2, up 1. So plot the midpoint. What that does is it has now cut that segment AB in half. So we've done half of the problem. In order to find the bisector, you need to find the middle and plot it. That is half the battle. But we also need to make it perpendicular. We need to graph a line that's perpendicular. So that means I need to know the slope. So the second thing we're going to do here is we're going to calculate the slope. We want to find slope. The slope is the change in y over change in x, which means I count y direction first, then x. If you count down, it's always negative. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start at A and count down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we went down 6, and then to the right is positive. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to go ahead and reduce this slope before we continue. So to reduce the slope, I just type it in my calculator. -6 divided by 4, math, enter, enter. -3 over 2. So I'm just going to reduce it. It just makes it a little bit easier when plotting. The next thing we have to do, that is the slope of this line. We need to make it perpendicular because we want a perpendicular bisector. So to make it perpendicular, it's opposite reciprocal, which means reciprocal flips the fraction, 2 over 3. Opposite means change the sign. If you have a negative in the first fraction, you get no negative in the second fraction. So what we just did was we made it perpendicular by flipping the fraction and changing the sign. And this is what you want to graph. When you graph it, you have to start at the midpoint. So we're going to go up 2, right 3. Plot your point. That is the perpendicular line that we just calculated. From here, what you're going to go ahead and do is connect your 2 points together. So we want to go ahead and connect the midpoint to this piece. So I'm going to use a ruler, connect it, and I'm going to put a 90-degree angle. And that's how you calculate and draw a perpendicular bisector.